Today we get to go and jump right into the articles of the Tabernacle. And my goal for this is to show you that reading through things isn't as boring and as laborious as it may first seem. If you actually stick with it, you'll really get a lot out of it, and you'll see what God is doing throughout the rest of the Bible if we actually understand these elements. So let's turn to Exodus 25. Exodus 25. All right. And so these are the big ideas are from Exodus 25 until about Exodus 35, we get these direct imperatives. Direct imperatives means that God is telling people what to do. He's saying, build it this way, make it this way, bring me these articles. And so this is first person commands in which he tells his people all of the things which he needs created so that he may dwell with his people. And last week we covered an overview about the indwelling, the tabernacling of God with his people. And that goes from the beginning of the Bible, from Genesis all the way through Revelation. God intends to dwell among his people. So let's start reading, and then we'll just continue to exposit as we go. So let's start at verse 1, and says, "The Lord spake unto Moses." This is God saying things directly to him. He's on the Mount Sinai, and he's telling Moses directly what he wants. "Speak unto the children of Israel, that they may bring me an offering. Of every man that giveth it willingly of his heart, ye shall take my offering, and this is the offering which ye shall take of them." And so he gives you a list of all of the things that he wants. He wants gold and silver and brass and scarlet and fine linens and all of these things, acacia wood. It's called shittim in the Bible. All of these things that are required to construct his tabernacle, his dwelling place, he specifically outlines. So where do the children of Israel get all of this stuff? It's only 50 days after the Passover. This is 50 days after they the killing of the firstborn, the last plague, and then the exit from Egypt. They've been enslaved for years. Where did the children of Israel get all of this? What was that? The spoils, right. So my point is here, let's turn back to Exodus 11. This is where God starts to provide for himself. And so we can make this application that God won't require anything of us that he doesn't first provide to us. So we're going to get to chapter 11 in the book of Exodus, and verse 2 and 3 says, "Speak now in the ears of the people, and let every man borrow of his neighbor, and every woman of her neighbor, jewels of silver and jewels of gold. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Moreover, the man Moses was very great in the land of Egypt, in the sight of Pharaoh's servants, and in the sight of the people." God gave them favor amongst their captors. And so God is starting a process in which he's going to provide all of the gold and silver and precious things that he will need for his tabernacle. He knows that those things are going to happen. And 50 days later, he asked Moses, and he will ask the people to give back those things. But those things are not for our own personal enjoyment. Those are not just because the Egyptians were being kind to the Israelites, because they weren't. They were doing it because God gave them favor, and this favor was for a purpose. This was for the children of Israel to demonstrate obedience. So in chapter 12, he does this again. Chapter 12, at the end, they've already had the last plague, and at the end, Pharaoh is going to let the Israelites go. And in chapter 12, verse 35, it says, "And the children of Israel did according to the word of Moses, and they borrowed of the Egyptians jewels of silver and jewels of gold and raiment, and the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians." He does this again. So it's 2 times that he collects from the people of Egypt. And Brother Carl said, the spoils. That's what's happening. They're taking the spoils of the land. They didn't earn it. I guess because they were enslaved, they'd worked for free for so long. But it wasn't just because there was something that they deserved. It was because God gave it to them so that it could be returned to him. And so this is how the tabernacle narrative starts. He says, bring this to me. And we'll see here that when Moses communicates this command to the people give willingly. They give freely of their heart. And they give so much that Moses has to tell them to stop. That's how much they give. This is very different than the story of building the temple. And we'll see that Solomon, he levies taxes against the people, and he essentially puts people in work camps, in bondage, to bring all of the stone, all of the timber, and all of these things. And what it does is it puts a burden, a strain on the Israelite people, and they resent him for it. And he'll pay for that later. So there's a difference between free will giving of your heart, giving out of the abundance of your heart, and forced giving. And this is where I can see an Old Testament application before the law of where free will giving is the New Testament model for giving. Sure, tithes and offerings are a good principle. That's the principle. But the heart of the people should be this free will giving. So much so that all of the needs for God's purposes are complete, and they say, okay, that's enough. We've had enough to do the things that we need to do, and it's going to be a blessing to the children of Israel that they obey. So let's move down a little bit. We're going to talk about the actual Ark of the Covenant. So, hey, Jeremiah, come up here real quick. These are going to be the dimensions. They give it in this idea of cubit. So put your arm up, elbow to, this is a cubit. First of your finger all the way to your elbow, that's 18 inches, okay? That's almost perfect. This is a cubit. And so when it talks in the Bible in cubits, that's how you measure it. It goes from the tip of your longest finger to your elbow. And even though we're approximately the same size, mine's 17 and change. So that's about the size of a cubit. So when it says it's 2.5 cubits, so let's go to the length of the ark. The length of the ark is here. So this is how long it is, right? It's not a very big thing. The depth of the ark is 2'4". So the depth of the ark is here, and the width of the ark is about here. It's a rectangle, okay? And so I just want you to, thanks, that's cool. I just want you to start picturing things in your mind when you read them in the Bible and have some physical representation of it, but I didn't want to show you a artistic representation of it, because when I do that, then that becomes your image. And so you look at Indiana Jones and you said, that's the Ark of the Covenant. That's not the Ark of the Covenant, right? So if the instructions for building it are listed in the Bible like it is, with very precise dimensions, then let's just do that, okay? And so this is about 3'9". This is 2'4" inches, and it's the same across and top. So then they have golden rings, and the golden rings are at the corners. And these golden rings, so the box is the box. It's made of acacia wood, also called shittim in the Bible. It's a normal wood. It's a wood that's found in the desert that they're walking through. And so what I don't want you to do is to interpret things and say that aren't freely given for interpretation. It could just be wood. And so that's what it is. And so people were like, oh, well, the poles, they could be representative of the cross, and that you'll make too many leaps that aren't given to you in the New Testament. And there's enough explanation in the New Testament about the Old Testament for us to chew on, and we'll see that here in a second. All right, so this whole thing is covered in gold, and it doesn't tell you any decorative or ornamental things that are on the actual rectangular box on the ark. And so in your brain, it's just covered in gold, all right? So when we see images of it, they're fine to have artistic renditions of it, but realize that the Bible doesn't give you a description. But he does give you a description that there's poles that are in these rings, and these poles are permanent. There's other articles in the tabernacle that have removable poles. These poles have to stay, okay? And so these are made of the same wood, and they are covered in gold as well. The inside of the box is gold. The outside of the box is gold. These staves, these poles are gold. these things are gold. Everything within the Holy of Holies, which is the most sacred place, is covered in gold because it represents a purity. And we'll see gold not only in Eden, remember, but we also saw gold in Revelation at the end. And so we get these pictures of paradise. Does gold really mean anything to God? Besides a visual a picture for us, that's what it really means. But God owns everything. Gold is just molecules to God. But what it does is it gives us pictures to understand worth, to understand purity, to understand the highest value, and that's what this ark is going to represent. All right, so inside of the ark are going to be placed the 2 tablets. And so the 2 tablets were the 10 Commandments. And so that's what's inside of the ark. There's other elements, and if we look in Hebrews chapter 9, there's other elements that are listed. But this is the only thing that's mandatory in the ark, and this remains in the ark. So the other things that are in the ark, at least temporarily, are Aaron's staff, it budded, and that shows God's selection of leadership. And it has a jar of manna. And so when we read about these things in Exodus, he tells us that they're before God's presence. And so possibly, as we can understand Hebrews 9, they may put it in the ark to transport it because this is a mobile tabernacle. When they go and they pick up, they're semi-nomadic people. When they go and pick up to a different location, they have to break all of this down like a traveling, like a state fair. They have to break down the tents. They have to put the stuff in it, and then they have to take it with them. Okay? So this is the ark. The people that are in charge of this ark are called the Kohathites. Kohathites. So the Kohathites are a special subdivision of Levites. So he gives different divisions of Levites specific jobs. But even the Kohathites can't touch the ark without Aaron and his sons covering it first. So we see here in 2 Samuel, I believe it was, where Uzzah tries to touch it. The ark is about to fall over. It's on a wagon. It's about to fall over, and he touches it, and he dies immediately. And David's kind of sad about that. But the principle here is that God says that no one can touch the ark. That means no one, right? And so God's laws are firm, and they are without waiver, and they are perfect. So even if you're trying to do something good, if you disobey God's command, it's always wrong. It's always evil, and it's always deserving of death. And so we have to see this not only as a picture, but these are principles in which to teach the Israelite people who have been in a pagan land for so long. And so he's got to impress upon them the perfection of God, the strict adherence to the law, because he is a perfect God. So the Kohathites are in charge of moving it, but they're also in charge of making bread, and we'll get there in a second. Does anybody have any questions about the Ark of the Covenant? Right? So let's change this. Let's go delete. Delete. Okay. What's on top of the ark? Let's do that. Perfect. The same dimensions, at least in a rectangular form, of the ark is the cover. And so the cover is made of gold, once again. So the same length and width, there's a depth to it, and they call it a crown, which means kind of like a raised or beveled edge. And so there's a crown around it. And there are cherubims. And in my teens didn't get to hear about the cherubims, but they're winged creatures. And these winged creatures are made out of solid gold. These are clearly not, this is a really bad picture. But the idea is that their wings are facing towards each other. And these aren't angels that look like people with wings. These are creatures have different faces. They have arms. These cherubims have 4 wings. 2 of them cover themselves, and 2 of them fly. And they have feet that look like hooves, and we read about that in Ezekiel 1, okay? So if you want to know what angels look like, look in the Bible and not at pictures and artist renditions, okay? So it's still really hard to imagine, but that's what cherubim look like. And cherubim means two or more, right? Cherub is the singular. So when you see babies with wings, that's not what they look like, okay? So these are artist renditions of what the cherub looks like. But clearly, Bezalel, which is the artist that makes all of this stuff for Moses, he knows what they look like. So Moses explains what they look like. He knows exactly what cherubs look like, and so he makes these cherubs. So these cherubs are looking downward. That's where their faces are. So we talked about in Eden, the angel, the cherubs have a fiery sword and they're facing east, and they prevent Adam and Eve and any other of Adam and Eve's descendants from returning back into the garden, returning back into God's presence. They're facing us. And so in Ezekiel, that's exactly what the angel is doing. He's facing Ezekiel, and he strafes. He doesn't turn his body to move in the direction that he wants to go. He always faces forward. So when it says that the angels are facing downward, that's got to be important. And so why is this important? Well, this is important because we have to understand these New Testament terms. One is called propitiation. So this is what happens. Remember, what's inside of the ark? 10 Commandments, right? The tablets of the covenant. Then you get to this cover called, in the Bible, the mercy seat. A seat doesn't mean that there's a chair on top. A seat means like Washington, D.C. is the seat of power. The White House is the seat of the executive branch, right? A seat means that it is the focus. It's the center of a thing. So when we talk about the mercy seat, it's still a flat cover, and so sometimes it's called the atonement cover, but it just means that this is the centralized, laser-like focus of mercy where God is going to meet, he's going to dwell with his people. And so that's why it's called the mercy seat. There's not a chair that sits on top of it. So the angels, their faces are looking down. So this represents us. We have the priest. You go through the law, you go through mercy, and what's on top of the mercy seat when once a year at the Day of Atonement? There's blood. And that's how we can get to God. The angels, without the blood, prohibit us from entering back into God's presence, okay? They keep us from dwelling with God. When there is blood from a pure sacrifice on top of the mercy seat, then we get this word called propitiation. And so let's look up that word. Let's go to Romans 3:25. Romans 3:25. And this is why understanding the Old Testament helps us with the New Testament. Romans 3:25, and it says, "Whom God hath set forth to be a propitiation through faith in his blood, to declare his righteousness for the remission of sins that are past through the forbearance of God." I'm going to write you a fancy word here. Let's clear this board. What we're talking about is this word, hysterion. I think that's, did I spell that right? Oh, hysterion. There's an A in there. Anyway, it's Greek. But this word is the same, is what propitiation is translated in. But let's go to Hebrews. Hebrews chapter 9, verse 4. Hebrews chapter 9, verse 4. I'm sorry, let's go to verse 5. Hysterion. Chapter 9, verse 5. "And the cherubim sits, and over it, the cherub of glory shadows the mercy seat." Highlight that thing, mercy seat. That's the same Greek word. So the same Greek word which the author of Hebrews uses to write, and the same word that Paul uses in the book of Romans, and the same word that John uses when he writes this word, and it's translated in the English, propitiation. is this Greek word, and it's translated in Hebrews because of the context, mercy seat. It's the same word. So when we understand what that original mercy seat does, let's clear that one. What the same mercy seat does, we can now have a better biblical, theological understanding of what is happening. We have angels. They are always in the presence of God. Their faces are towards mankind. And through the law, through God's mercy, and through the atonement blood is how we meet with God in his perfect, his omnipotent state. So God is above the mercy seat. Let's read Psalms 99. And if this really ties in this vision of God hovering over the mercy seat. Psalms 99. And we can read the whole thing because it'll be helpful. Where am I? I should have marked this. Is everybody getting close? Because I'm not. Psalms 99. Okay, here we go. The Lord reigneth, let the people tremble. He sitteth between the cherubims, let the earth be moved. It's these same angels, this picture that we are depicting in the Ark of the Covenant. He's sitting between the cherubs, let the earth be moved. The Lord is great in Zion, he is high above all people. Let them praise thy great and terrible name, for it is holy. The king's strength also loveth judgment. Thou doest establish equity. Thou executest judgment and righteousness in Jacob. Exalt ye the Lord our God, and worship at his footstool, for he is holy. So we sometimes hear of the mercy seat as being God's footstool. So it is the picture of a throne. The invisible God is sitting on a throne. The footstool is here, and the high priest comes and worships at God's footstool. This is this picture of a throne. And so when we look at Revelation about the footstool, when we see the earth is God's footstool, we can have this idea that God is high above. He's at a throne. Christ is seated with him now after his resurrection. And these images are not just items. These are theological truths that help us understand the New Testament and help us understand what heaven will be like. So, does anybody have any questions about the picture of the ark? All right, it's not, you guys, have anybody watched Indiana Jones? Nope? Oh, yeah, of course Mr. Shell does. All right. Okay, so you don't even have a picture in your brain what that looks like. So the Ark of the Covenant is within the Holy of Holies. It's the central seat, the mercy seat of God as he dwells with his people. Does God exist everywhere? Yeah, he absolutely does, right? There is no place in which we can escape God's presence. But what he is trying to show his newly gathered people back at the Mount of Sinai, he's trying to show them a visible picture of an invisible God. And he'll come and dwell, he'll come and have the word is theophany. He'll come and have a visage, a picture that exists for them to see because it's so difficult for them to understand. They don't have the blessing of the full counsel of God that comes through the canon of Scripture, right? We do, and we can piece all of these things together. And this is why it's recorded in Exodus for nearly a third of the book. It feels like it's too much. You're like, okay, I don't care that there's gold here and the length of this here. You should absolutely care because it builds your faith and it helps you understand what's happening in the New Testament. Okay? All right, let's go back to Exodus. Exodus 25 is where we start. We're going to continue. So we did the mercy seat. We talked about who takes care of it. Let's talk about some of the other elements. We got a few minutes. Erase. Cool. All right, so after the mercy seat, let's get to the table. So there's some dimensions on the table. I have the notes, and you can see there's dimensions of the table. This is not inside the Holy of Holies. Inside the Holy of Holies is just the ark. That's the only thing within inside the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies, and we'll get the dimensions as we continue on. The Bible is written with the Ark of the Covenant first, and then some of the articles, and so I'm just going to go through step by step as the Bible lays it out. So here's the table of showbread. And so the table of showbread is in the next area out. It's in the holy place. So there's the Holy of Holies, that's where the Ark of the Covenant is. In this other room, the first room that you go into is the holy place, and there's the table of showbread. And in this table, there are 12 loaves of bread. I'm not going to draw them out, but there's 12 loaves of bread. The Bible doesn't tell you what those loaves of bread represent, but there is a great allusion to the 12 tribes, and so what is going to be depicted here is not God just ruling and reigning, but God fellowshipping with his people. And this is what this bread, this showbread represents. So the Kohathites, they do a lot. The Kohathites make this bread, and you can read about that in Chronicles. But they set it out every week. So it sits there on the table for a week, and then at the end of the week, on the Sabbath, the people get to eat it. Not just everybody, the priests, the Levitical priests get to eat it in the presence of God. This is very different from Buddhism or Hinduism, in which food is offered to a god. This food is not offered to God. God doesn't need to eat, right? His people do. But what God is showing us here is his desire to break bread, is to commune with us. This is something very unusual in the ancient world. God is showing himself to be distinct from their own imaginations of the gods of Egypt, of the gods of the Canaanites. God wants to fellowship with his people in specific ways, in an orderly way, in a way that he prescribes, but he does want to fellowship with us. And so when we have pictures in the New Testament of the Lord's Supper, which we repeat as an ordinance, right? We do this breaking of bread. It echoes all the way back 1,500 years to Moses. So 1,500 years, that's from Christ. So what's that, like 3,500 years. That picture that we do here usually on a Sunday evening, where we break the bread and we share the fruit of the vine with one another, this picture. It goes all the way back. God is consistent in his imagery. He's not on a low carb diet. He eats bread, and he's wanting to show this everlasting picture with fellowship with mankind. Okay. On the table is also frankincense. It's just a good smelling aroma. Remember, they're living in the desert. There's all these animals. They're killing and slaughtering animals all the time. There's blood everywhere. It doesn't smell good. Inside of the holy place, they have this table of showbread. There's frankincense on it, and then we'll see here the next element. All right, so let's do that. All right. So then we have the golden sticks, and I'm not going to depict it because in our brains, has anybody seen a menorah for a Jewish Hanukkah service? Right? You've seen a menorah. It looks flat, right? There's candles on it, and there's branches of candles. That's not really what's depicted here in Exodus, because the picture is of other pictures that we previously talked about in our last lesson. There is the tree of life that was in Eden. There is a burning bush. There is the tree of life here in Revelation. The menorah, or the golden candlestick, is a depiction of a tree. And so could it be this kind of candelabra that we now see, especially represented for the nation of Israel? It could have been. And we get that picture because Emperor Titus takes the second temple's menorah and he steals it and he brings it back to Rome. And so that's actually depicted in concrete, in rock, carved out into Emperor Titus's monument that still exists. And you can see there's a picture of guys hauling out the menorah from the second temple and bringing it back to Italy. So we can kind of understand what that version looked like. But the original version, no one has any idea what it looks like. But it does give you descriptions. It has cups on it. It doesn't have candles on it. It has these round almond-shaped cups that you fill with oil. And then it has leaves, and it says this word knops. These word knops are kind of like little budding things. And so it has branches and knops and almond-shaped cups. It's supposed to look like a tree. It's not supposed to look like a candelabra. Here, it says candlestick, but they're not candles that are placed on it. It's oil, and with wicks in it that the people have to keep, the Levites have to keep burning all the time, right, eternally. So it pictures a tree, and so we have these visions of trees throughout the Bible. And so when we get moved from one picture to another, let's carry them forward. All right? And then they talk about snuff dishes and tongs to help them move these things around. So the candelabra, the candlestick, the menorah there is made out of solid gold. And it says it weighs 1 talent. 1 talent is 75 pounds of gold. That's a pretty valuable thing. So I don't know if it's solid gold or if it's slightly hollow in the middle. It's probably slightly hollow in the middle so that the Kohathites can move it around from place to place. But that's what, so when you come up and you read these things, I want you to slow down and think about what does this actually look like in my mind, because God has saved this for thousands of years to be a testimony to himself about his specific designs. Moses communicates it to the people, and the people obey it exactly. The artisans obey it exactly, and they say, as Moses told them, as the Lord told him. The idea here, when we get through a third of Exodus that talk about these very specific building plans, is that they are doing precisely what God commands. Each time they go, and we'll get a little story in the middle where they don't do what God commands. That's the golden calf story. And so it's a story that is put there as kind of an accent to show you the difference between perfect, willing, overflowing obedience and this, I'm going to do it myself and let me make a God of my own. And then they go back and they're like, okay, that wasn't a good idea. And so when they build this tabernacle where God can dwell with his people, it is just this amazing picture where the omnipotent God of the universe condescends. He comes down in a form. Does God need a tent? God doesn't need a tent. We need the tent, right? And so does God need to come in human form in the incarnation of Christ? We need it. We need this physical understanding of God indwelling, right? He dwelt amongst men. And so this is this idea. So when we see these pictures, let's understand them in the context of the entire Bible. Also, let's not go too far ahead of ourselves and interpret things that aren't clearly described in the Bible. One of the things which, even in my studies, talked about the location of the Ark of the Covenant, of the Ark of Testimony. It's called many, many things. And some believe that Jeremiah hides it in a mountain, and that's where the Ark of the Covenant still resides. One, it's just a picture, right? It's a valuable thing to God, but it's just a picture. It's a physical representation for us, for the children of Israel, to represent a theological truth. But that idea that Jeremiah hides it in a mountain, that comes from 2nd Maccabees. So if you're getting information from apocrypha books, if you're getting information from Deuterocanonical, the second canon, the stuff that we don't read, we don't believe in, and has never been accepted by the Jewish community. Those books, 1st and 2nd Maccabees, those have never been accepted by the Jewish in the Jewish Torah. Then you run into risk of confusing yourself or making assumptions about the Ark of the Covenant that don't need to be there, right? And so when God reveals these things to Moses, he says, as I've shown you on the mountain, God is showing the true picture in heaven to Moses. That's how Moses understands it. He's like, he goes up for 40 days, he sees these visions in heaven, and so he can record them down. God tells him verbally, and he writes them down, but he can tell his artisans what it actually looked like because he saw it in heaven. And so there is no need to actually go and search for an object. right? That is a picture. That is an object. That's not the key to our faith. So even if they found something, I don't need to find evidence that it existed. I have evidence that it existed right here, okay? All right, does anybody have any questions or anything to add? Anything that I was confusing on or spoke too fast? That's only one chapter. And that's a chapter that when I first read it, I was like, oh, this is pretty boring. But if you stop and you read it, and you study, and you let it wash over you, you get really excited about it, and then you jump all over the Bible, and this Bible interprets the Bible. And that's what you guys, that's what I want you to get to, where you're so passionate about finding out what this mercy seat really means that you go all the way into Hebrews and figure out what the mercy seat is, right? All right. Well, amen.